Welcome back. In a recent video where I was analyzing one of my own rapid games, I came across this position near the end, which is where I'd lost most of my advantage, and I ended up drawing about 8 or 10 moves later by repetition. But right here, I was supposed to play queen to e2, and I couldn't figure out why, and I think I have now, so I'm just going to go through it really quickly. Now, I saw when I was analyzing the game and on that video that it threatens both of these pawns, but I thought these two pawns are already defended by the queen, and white can easily defend the b2 pawn by moving the rook over. Okay, well, let's say it says that their best move is actually to play f4 at this point. I don't know if anybody that I've played would make that move right now. There's no way to know what an opponent would play. And it says that the second best move, Stockfish's suggestions right up here, says rook to c1. I don't think anybody I've ever played, maybe the international master, would make that move, because that leaves this pawn hanging, the b2 pawn. It says their third best move is queen to g2. I kind of understand that, because I've just lined up my queen with their king, threatening to come through here if anything else ever happens. So I kind of understand that. But I suspect most people that I've played would play rook to b1 here, just because this is the only thing that it looks like, obviously, that this is threatening. But if they played that, watch, that would have been an even bigger mistake. It says now I need to take this pawn. And then it kind of makes clear. Somebody, one of you, thank you, privately messaged me on chess.com instead of commenting here on YouTube, and said that this is probably what was coming next, is that the rook comes here to take f3, threatening the queen. So the queen has to move someplace, possibly gets taken. Stockfish says white's best move here would actually be just to take the rook and lose the queen for it. If that happened, I'm pretty sure I would know to take that. That's the only move that doesn't lose on the spot. And then it says they would bring the rook here to protect that pawn, which makes sense. At that point, I don't know exactly what I would do. Stockfish says I should play f5 or king to f7. I do know it's an endgame. I might start bringing my king. I'm not sure. Or g5 even. That's a move I might play just because the pawns would protect each other at that point, and it would kind of give my king a path, a zigzag path out of here if my front g pawn had been moved up. I suspect I would probably do something like queen to e2, which threatens the rook and this pawn, and they can't protect both of them except by moving the rook here, and then that gives up this pawn. So they could protect the rook by, say, something. Oh, it's my turn. Okay, so if I did something like this, they could protect the rook this way, but then I would pick up this pawn. It still says that f5, g5, and king to f7 are my best moves. But I still think I would probably take that b pawn at this point. How bad would that be? Not that bad. I'm still -8 here. It says their best move is one of these, which I think then I would just take that one too, or this one, and just start chopping stuff off. And my queen is in this area, able to pretty easily protect these pawns as well. There's not much white could do at that point. But backing up, I don't know that anyone I've played would take the rook here with their queen. They hopefully wouldn't have Stockfish visible on their screen, knowing that that's their best move. They might take this pawn, but I doubt it, just because doing so undefends this pawn. So I don't know. I could see some people I've played bringing their rook over here to line up their rook and queen together, being able to block any future checks with either piece. I could also see people that I have played maybe bringing their queen this way, to connect it with their rook and help to guard this pawn. Although in that case, I would still take it with my rook. That seems to be the issue here, is if they don't take my rook and they do whatever it says the second best move is rook to g1, well, then I take the queen, right? So the third best move was queen captures g6, and in that case, I'm taking this now, right? How do you get out of check here? King to g1, king to h1, king to g3. Those are the choices, or blocking with the queen, which loses a queen and probably gets mated pretty quickly. In fact, Stockfish is saying everything except king g1 is a direct 4 moves or less mating sequence. King to g1, then I would probably have trouble finding my next move at that point. I would be worried about a check here. No, I'm not, because my queen is there. My goodness. And it says my best move is here. Now, I do understand that. That continues to protect this spot and lines up a battery through, not a battery, a discovered check through the rook. Because at that, some point I could move the rook away and have that discovered check. So I might find that move. Okay, backing up to the original position where I should have played queen to e2. What if they did not play this weak and losing move like I suspected most players that I've played against would play? What if they played the best move, which is f4? f4 I understand now that I know what the point of it is, because it keeps me from taking f3. Now my rook can't get there. So now what would I do? It says now I would take the free pawn, which is probably what I would have done, because I would have thought, had I ever found queen to e2 in this situation, I would have thought, why didn't they protect that pawn? This pawn is not threatening my rook. This queen is not threatening my rook. My rook's protected, right? They don't have a pawn on the e-file or the g-file that can possibly threaten my rook in any way. So I would probably take the pawn. And that threatens the rook and threatens this pawn. They can't protect both of them. Oh, sorry, no, the pawn is protected by the queen. Okay, well, hopefully I would see that. The rook is definitely under threat. Where does it go? It says d1. Okay, that makes sense. That threatens something down here. f1 to protect that pawn, not a bad idea. I think people I've played would have found that. I think that's what they would probably do, because it would give them the freedom to move the queen. Maybe. I don't know. Maybe they would see the weak king here and see one of these two open files, hoping to come this way, hoping I would try to escape here and end up getting mated somehow, but that's not a mate. I could always block that with my rook. Also, if they did check down here, I'm getting away with my king, right? I might lose a couple of pawns in the process. What if they did find one of those? It says I would just go ahead and take this pawn. How nice. And then if they checked, because that's what people do at my level, right? Yeah, it says go this way, not this way. Okay, because if I go that way, they start picking off pawns. So I go this way, then what do? Make a king move? Queen move? I'm still ahead, but you see, that advantage wasn't the kind of advantage. Again, going back to this original position where I should have played queen e2. If they had made the move to protect the pawn, I would have had to have found this, which I might, because it threatens the queen. I might have taken this way, hoping for a queen trade, knowing that many people that I play much more poorly without their queen. But if they make some of the best moves in this position, that leaves a lot of latitude for me to mess up, and some moves that might be difficult for someone at my level to find. So it's possible that this is one of those advantages that Stockfish can find and a higher level player might find and convert it. I have a feeling I would have messed that up. Whereas it was, I forced what I actually did in the game was played queen to e5, forcing a queen trade because of this. And it turned out to not be very good. I lost most of my advantage. But I got a draw out of it, which is better than I could have done. I was pretty sure that if we started simplifying here, that I could either win this endgame by better pawn management, or I could draw it, and we did draw. So, but the idea of this video is to show that there were definite winning chances here, just because there's multiple threats. This keeps the queen from moving anywhere, because if the queen gets too far, I can take this pawn. If the queen makes a move that tries to protect that pawn, I can take this with my rook. If the queen stays on this file here, on the G file, I can move my rook here, basically forcing the queen off of the G file, which would allow me to capture this with my queen and probably or possibly result in a very quick mate. For example, if at this point and they played this and I moved here, Stockfish says the queen would go to h4. I can see why that's their best move, because it continues protecting this pawn. But if they went anywhere else, say to here, well, now it's mating too, right? Because the king has to get out and then I mate. So I do see that, and I'm going to try to keep an eye out for things like that in the future when I'm here. That it's not just a one-move threat on the B pawn that's easily protected, which is how I first evaluated that. It's a multi-purpose move. Not only is my queen not in danger, even if the rook could safely come here and that pawn wasn't under threat, like there's plenty of escape routes. Not to mention the threat to this queen. So hopefully that helps understand that position a little bit better, and I needed more time to look at that specific move. That's one thing that I don't like about these 10 to 15 minute videos where I analyze my own games, is often there's a move like this that needs a lot more looking into. And as you can see, I've spent 12 and a half minutes looking at this one move and the possibilities of it. Part of the problem too is that Stockfish expects perfect play from the opponent, which we often don't see at our level, my level around 1200 rapid. Again, I think a lot of people I have played would try to protect that pawn. They might even try to move this pawn in order to give another space for their king to escape. I really don't know. How bad would that have been? I still would have just taken, I still would have just taken here, and their best move still would be to take back. Which I understand that would leave me in a really good situation. And their best move is king g1, of course, to protect this pawn. But they do that, then like f5. I'm probably not going to see that. Queen to g4 check. I would probably see that as a way to pick off this pawn, and then try to do something that ended up forking this rook, maybe. Thank you for watching. As always, I'm still trying to get better, and hopefully you are too. And let's keep our fingers crossed. We'll see you next time.